is actually devotional service, because it's meant for the pleasure of Krishna. It's meant as a sacrifice for Lord Vishnu, for the pleasure of the Supreme Lord. And it's clear, he goes throughout as he elaborates on this process. In chapter 2, when Krishna just started, he tells Arjuna, listen carefully, I'm going to give to you the process. All the anxieties that he have in terms of how to perform what is the right thing for him to do, was the anxiety that, he's going to do something so wrong, not only for him but for others, in terms of the reactions that work, fighting the world, was going to do. And Krishna is telling, I'm going to teach you a process that not only would allow you to be free from the reactions, but also will elevate you to the platform of perfection. So that is the process that Krishna gave to us. So it's a process that takes in consideration both our material condition and something like using your material condition to elevate yourself to perfection. Or in other words, what the Ishopanishad, that Ishavasya principle explains, that to be in that Ishavasya principle, we have to cultivate both simultaneously, matter and spirit, vidya and avidya. Avidya means your material knowledge, or your material nature, and vidya means transcendental knowledge about who you are, what is your relationship with God, who's God. So these two things simultaneously. And when those things are perfectly in balance, then we're qualified for liberation. That's what the Ishopanishad says. Then we're Krishna conscious. So one have to recognize that. For being able to do that, in that verse of the Sri Ishopanishad is explained that it's only possible when your life is ruled by transcendental knowledge. By transcendental knowledge, understanding what is the goal of transcendental knowledge gives us the understanding what is the goal of life. The goal of life is self-realization. That's what transcendental knowledge does. Self-realization means that we come to understand, or the purpose of our life is to regain or understand or fully realize our swarup, or our eternal spiritual position. So that's the goal. So then everything that we have materially is an asset, or is a tool to achieve that goal. And thus everything we do, everything we eat, every activity we do is meant for that. It's meant to allow us to connect or to progress in the process of self-realization. So it is a process that is recommended. It is a process that is there, Krishna-given process for conditioned souls. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains that there are two types of living entities. One is the living entities that are situated in the spiritual constitution. There's Swarup in the spiritual world. And there are the living entities that are move away from that and trying to pursue this so-called happiness in the material world, or they're conditioned by the material world. And among those who are in this material world condition, he explains that there are three types of living entities. There are the Nitya Muktas, that are eternal liberated souls. They come to the material world, but they're eternally liberated. So these are, personalities from the spiritual world that comes for a particular mission, as Shakti Avesh, avatars, etc., etc. Then there is the Bhada Muktas, right? Bhada Muktas means those who, by the mercy of those Nitya Muktas, they actually become liberated from the condition of the material world. So they're in the material world, but they're not touched by the material world. Their condition, they have been free. And then there's the Nitya Bhadas that are eternally conditioned. Now, sometimes people ask, well, eternally conditioned. From the perspective of our time in this material world is an eternity. It's been since time, because I remember hearing my spiritual master explaining that when you take a sample of eternity, it's also eternal. So from that perspective, just looking, all different phases of eternity. But in reality, for us, it's an inconceivable thing. For us, it's either, we are accustomed to linear time, so it's either this or that. If it's eternal, means that there is no change, is what it is. But from the perspective of a spirit, it's something else. It's a different thing. And then Srila Bhaktivinoda says that among those who are Nitya Bhadas, or eternally conditioned, there are three types. Ones that are concealed, that their consciousness is concealed, and he explains. He actually gives it's an analogy of a flowering tree. So when you have a seed of a sunflower plant, you can have the seed. So that seed is a concealed consciousness. And that's the consciousness of entities like trees, things like that are, so concealed that it's almost they have no consciousness. They're not very conscious, very concealed, very covered. Then the next one is what exactly the word that he said? Let me see if I find it here. I was just reading. Remember the word that he used. Yeah, the next one is constricted. So one is concealed, the other one is constricted. And constricted means when is actually no, not like the seed. He actually compared the analogy is, I'm sorry, I back up again. The analogy is of a flower. So before the flower, you don't see anything. You see, it's concealed. It's just, now when it's spring, you start to see things just start to bloom. But before it's bloom, in winter, things are concealed. You don't see anything. Then constricted, you see some little thing is coming out, but, it's not clear yet what it is. So constricted consciousness means like animals, birds, etc. So the consciousness is very limited. And then it comes the other one, and this is of those who are nitya bhadas. And then comes those who are in a budding consciousness. So you see the bud is close, but there is something there that this is a flower. It's just close. It's in a budding state. And that's human beings, basically. Human beings, budding consciousness is people berets of devotion. Humans that are completely have no understanding or have no transcendental knowledge. No understanding of who they are spiritually and a proper conception of God or a relationship with God. Now, the question comes then, this budding, then of the budding, then there's five divisions. And the first one is uncivilized tribal people. Then it comes Melechas, cultures, Americans, Europeans, that are have some sort of material advancement, focusing on industrial things, but have no proper conception of what is the right things to do. And then after that comes those who have no personal God, but they're fond of nature, Buddhists. And after that comes Karmakanda, those who have some conception of a God, of a supreme, but they do their worship, like Krishna says, in this word aparadharma, in an inferior way. Their motivations are for their personal sense gratification. So they do the whole thing wrong. So there's no proper conception. And the next one is the impersonalists. Those who have, this, the Nirvisheshavadas and, that type of thing. That they have an impersonal conception of God. These are considered budding. But then Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur explains the second type, the Bhada Muktas, those who are liberated. They're living in this world, but they're in the process of liberation. They actually, so there are two, the Nitya Bhadas, Bhada Muktas. They are of blooming, when they start to bloom, so the buds start to open. So when the buds start to open, is is called the sadhaka bhaktas. So those are the devotees, the practicing devotees. And you can see how in the practicing devotees, consciousness start to open. Now, it is a gradual process. You know, you first see, you know, the thing, the little, you know, flower opening. Now you can see a flower. And when it's fully bloom, is when the devotee is all the manifestations of devotion to Krishna is fully bloom, fully manifested. So there's these two. So to be able to receive that, to be able to be in this position that your consciousness start to open and understand, we have to receive transcendental knowledge. We have to receive that transcendental knowledge. And the subject matter of the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita is that Krishna explains to Arjuna that you have to have a proper understanding of Krishna's activities and Krishna's appearance, the purpose of his appearance. So he explains that. He tells Arjuna that his appearance is sambhavami atma mayaya. He appears by his own personal potency. He explains that to Arjuna, that the difference between you and me is that I can remember all my appearances in this world because I appear in my personal form. So his form never changes. His original transcendental form, Atma Mayaya. And then he explains that he appears next after this verse. He says, you know, that the purpose of his appearance, when there's a decline in religion, then he appears to establish in the principles of religions and to give pleasure and protect the devotees and to annihilate the miscreants. He does that regularly. And then when we come to understand, in truth, the nature of his appearance and the nature of his activities, then we're qualified to go back home, back to Godhead. And not only that, we won't fall down again. So the demigods are highlighting these principles in their prayers. They're eulogizing the Supreme Lord for his activities and his purposes. They're recognizing the purpose, and with that type of consciousness then can naturally surrender to the Lord. And so they have this position of saranagati, no? That they can naturally see the Lord as their protector and their maintainer. And they pray to that. They pray to the Supreme Lord for kindly protect them from these demoniac disturbances. I didn't prepare very much for this, so it was... so I'm going to stop here if anyone wants to add something, comments and things like that. Yes, Prabhuji. You may have to mute it. It's probably... Oh, now you go. Then you go. Yeah, that's good.
Hare Krishna. Prabhu, could you explain about realizing in truth the transcendental birth, activities, name, form of Krishna? We hear that a lot in this section, this verse, Janma Karma, has been quoted many times. And so I'm wondering, what does that mean, in truth? Because, if one reads Prabhupada's books, then one seems to have a pretty good understanding that, okay, Krishna is not human. His birth is, he's fully spiritual, Satchidananda Vigraha. So, what does it mean in truth? Because I want to get the boon of this shloka and go back to Krishna. So how do I fully understand this realization?
Yeah, I asked His Holiness Prabhupada Swami the last time he was here. He was explaining about that we have to be situated in our spiritual conception to be able be able to fully be present and connected to the personality of Godhead. To have to be very established in spiritual conception. And to be able to do devotional service properly, right? So I say, well, so what is exactly, say, practicing, aspiring sadhaka? That I'm not necessarily all the time in my spiritual conception. So, but we do have a spiritual conception. What is that spiritual conception? Because, as you said, we know Krishna is God. We know I'm an eternal servant of Krishna. We have all this knowledge. We can give a class, we can tell people about the Bhagavad Gita and things like that. We study it. He says nominal. It's nominal knowledge. It's a nominal conception. So it's that principle of jnana and vijnana. We have received some jnana. We have received transcendental knowledge. Now we have to realize it. And that's when we fully be able to realize, then that's when we have that, tattvataha, in truth. We can understand Krishna. And, an example is, we know Krishna is none different than His holy name. And, we understand ourselves, and the devotees are sincere in terms of their desire to serve Krishna. And we do have some attachment to the deities that we serve. There's a connection. We pray to them. We feel touched and happy by their beauty and their reciprocation. Just to be able to appreciate their beauty is their reciprocation. Because not everybody appreciates them, but we can. So we understand it's a person, but we still neglect them. We neglect the holy name. Otherwise we'd be in ecstasy, in contact with the personality, Srinam. So that means that we're not in truth understanding that He is a person. We don't have sometimes the full understanding that the deity is a person, because otherwise, imagine just if we have that understanding, how different we will act. So anyway, making the point like that, we need to come to realize fully. And the process is we basically on getting all those blocks, all those anarthas, Cheto Darpana Marjana is our process, cleaning all the stuff that doesn't allow us to fully realize. So Is that right? Anything else?
I was just appreciating the comment about Baddha Mukta. I never heard about that, but it's amazing that sadhakas.
There's a really beautiful book by Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur called Vaishnava Siddhanta Mala, that he takes the Dasamula teachings of Lord Chaitanya, the 10 main teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and he breaks it down in questions and answers. You know that Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur sometimes does that to teach just simple people. I mean, once we're qualified on that, it's really helpful. So he does it in the form of questions and answers. He, make a question, and then, for example, here's for the first chapter of the Dasamula. He says, which is called the 9 Truths of Evidence, Nava Prameya Siddhanta. So question. What command has the Supreme Worshipable Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu give us? Answer. His order is this, that we very carefully observe the 9 instructions of truth that Sri Madhavacharya has given us through the Guru Parampara, disciplic succession, and so on. He goes, question after questions after question. It's fascinating. He's such an amazing acharya, Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, in terms of his broadness, Vaishnava Siddhanta Mala. Anything else? Okay, thank you so much. Garantara Shriman Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Haribo, thank you, Prabhu. Beautiful. Very, very nice. The boy was nice, and yeah, it rained a little bit, but it was in general, Shishirada Modar just hit a very